Well, for Europe, it wasn't a very good year. Not only did consumers have the problem of the cost of living crisis, but we've also had very high interest rates, which only now look like they might start coming down, but for the moment they're still very high. This has depressed demand more generally. The trading environment has not been good either, and we have the major country, you were talking about Germany just now, which is a locomotive for growth in Europe, not doing well at all. In fact, it's in recession, and the question is what's going to happen in the first quarter of 2024 when things don't look particularly good. We've just had the latest business climate index, the IFO business climate index, which shows that it fell, which is actually pretty worrying, and it's now at a 3-month low. The real question is, will some of the demand which one had hoped would materialize actually come in the coming months? And for the moment, what you're seeing is that businesses are quite pessimistic, and sentiment really among manufacturers in particular has been very poor.
Well, Vicky, in contrast, Greece is at the top of the best-performing European economies this year, and second time in a row already. So what's behind this remarkable result?
Well, it's interesting. Well, Greece has started from a very low base, so you can look at that and say, well, if you're starting so low, you're probably going to be doing reasonably well if you're just looking at percentages. Of course, its GDP is probably still below where it was pre-financial crisis. It went through a very, very bad period with the crisis of the Eurozone more generally, not just the financial crisis, but what happened afterwards. It's building up. The interesting thing is that it's also been named for the second time the best performing country among the richer nations in the world by the Economist, which, you know, given the fact that Greece is actually very, very small by comparison to many others, again, sort of perhaps explains why that pickup has taken place. But actually what's been happening in Greece is that it has benefited from the increase in tourism, of course, which has been pretty strong since COVID. Restrictions were removed, so that's a real positive. It has been receiving quite a lot of money from the rest of the EU under the Recovery and Resilience Plan, so it's been able to demonstrate that it's going to be using it properly. So a lot of, if you like, investment type money coming in, which can be spent in the right way to ensure the productivity improves in the economy. It's in a very strong position in terms of trade, right where it is positioned itself geographically. So yes, it's done well, but of course the question is, can all that continue, particularly if the trading environment, you know, it still looks a little bit worrying ahead, and we've had, of course, all these concerns even about what's happening in the Red Sea. So a little bit of a worry ahead, but yes, it's done well. It's reduced its inflation rate, it's reduced its debt to GDP ratio. So that's good news. Fingers crossed that it can continue.
So, in general, what is your outlook for the Eurozone as a whole for 2024?
That's a really difficult question to answer, because you had so many conflicting forecasts coming out. So the European Commission itself it has produced a forecast which suggested just back in November that perhaps we're going to see 1.3% growth in GDP in 2024 after just 0.6 in 23. Well, that sounded quite optimistic at the time. The European Central Bank has produced its own forecast just very, very recently, which is suggesting just 0.8% growth in the Eurozone. So we are in this uncertain environment where we talked about Germany earlier. So that, of course, sort of inevitably is going to be a very important factor in all this. We still have the war in Ukraine continuing. There are serious concerns, of course, in terms of what's going to happen in the future, because they're thinking again about re-establishing the Stability and Growth Pact, so there will be tighter conditions on various countries. So very uncertain, actually, looking ahead, particularly what may happen to trade, concerns about a future Trump presidency. So 2024 looks pretty uncertain. Can I just add one very quick thing? I said earlier about fingers crossed about Greece, because I have to come clean because I'm Greek originally. So obviously I have an interest in it doing well. So apologies for this. But yes, I'm slightly biased.